Humans responded with their weakest fleet, but it was more than enough explained in simple and interesting English. Around 2,500 words, with no headings. The galaxy was full of different kinds of life, some beautiful, some dangerous, some wise, and some cruel. Among all these species, there was one ancient and proud race called the Aralans. They were tall, with glowing blue eyes and golden skin. Their cities floated in the clouds, and their minds were full of knowledge. For hundreds of years, they had been one of the strongest civilizations in their part of the galaxy. They did not make friends easily, nor did they ask anyone for help. They believed they didn't need to. But everything changed when a terrible enemy arrived. The enemy came. Without warning, they called themselves the Threxians. They were violent, cold-blooded, and believed only in power. Their ships were dark and full of sharp edges, like giant knives in space. They did not want peace. They only wanted control. They began to destroy Aralan outposts one by one, burning cities, capturing leaders, and wiping out entire colonies. The Aralans tried to fight, but their weapons were no match. Their defenses were broken. Their proud armies fell. Within a few weeks, the Aralans lost everything they thought was untouchable. Their pride turned into fear. Kelvron was one of the last high-ranking leaders left. He had once stood in halls of gold and given speeches about wisdom and peace. Now, he stood in a ruined control room, surrounded by smoke, cracked screens, and dead silence. The planet he was on, Aurelia Prime, was the last major city that had not been taken. Threxian warships were on their way. People around Kelvron looked to him for answers, but he had none. Their communication systems were damaged, and most satellites were already destroyed. Only one weak satellite remained, spinning slowly. Above the planet, barely functional, could send a single message just when before it shut down forever. Kelvron knew what had to be done. He had to beg. Not to his allies, because the Aralans had none. Not to the other powerful empires, because they were too far away or too scared to help. He had to beg someone unknown, someone who might be foolish enough to try. And he remembered a strange one about a young species from a blue planet far away. A species called humans. Kelvron had never seen a human before. He had only heard whispers that they were violent but clever, emotional but brave. Some said they had no real army, no strong technology, and no understanding of the galaxy. Others said they had done impossible things, won wars they shouldn't have won, survived in places no one else could. Desperate, Kelvron decided to gamble everything on a hope. He knelt down in front of the cracked transmitter. The message he recorded was raw and broken. The words were full of pain. He spoke of his people, their suffering, and how the Aralans, once proud, were now begging. He said the Threxians would not stop with his world, that if no one helped, the darkness would spread. And he asked not for soldiers or glory, but for someone to care, to try, to show that mercy still lived in the galaxy. Then he sent the message to the coordinates where Earth was believed to be. After that, the satellite blinked off forever. On Earth, deep in the icy mountains of Alaska, there was a small space monitoring station. It was not very important. Most people there just listened to static and kept records. One cold night, as snow fell outside and coffee steamed inside, a young technician named Jamie heard something strange on the frequency. At first he thought it was noise. Then he heard a voice, weak, alien, and scared. He called his supervisor, who called another station, who sent the message to Earth's Central Defense Network at the Earth Defense Council in Geneva. Leaders listened to the broken message. It took hours to decode. Some thought it was fake. Some wanted to ignore it. Earth was busy with its own problems. There were arguments and politics, but one general, an old woman named Commander Horus, remembered the name Threxian from a long-forgotten warning left in an alien book found on Mars. She believed the threat was real. But Earth's main fleets were already guarding important borders. Sending them would take weeks and risk everything. She had only one choice: send a small fleet, something no one would miss if it failed. She looked at the list of available ships and crews. At the very bottom was a forgotten group called Fleet C7. It was made up of training ships, old models, and untested cadets. The fleet had been led by someone once famous, Admiral Roosevelt. She had been a hero during a rebellion years ago, but had fallen from favor after disobeying orders to save innocent lives. Since then, she had been pushed aside, given low-level tasks, and sent to dead ends. Now, she was being called again, but not as a savior. As a last hope, when Rosa received the mission, she sat alone in her small office on a dusty training base near Saturn. She stared at the message, listening to the alien's voice again and again. She didn't know why, but it touched something deep inside her. Maybe it was because she knew what it felt like to be abandoned, or maybe it was because no one else would do it. She stood up, put on her old uniform, and walked to the briefing room. The young officers looked at her with surprise and doubt. Some had only ever flown simulators. One girl had never even been in a real battle. Rosa looked at them and said, "We're going to save a world." The Uns Aurora was the lead ship. It was old but still strong. There were 4 other ships, smaller ones, all underpowered and carrying green crews. There was a nervous engineer named Petrov who always dropped his tools, a medical officer who got space sick, and a teenage boy named Omar Reyes who scored perfect marks in tactical simulations, but had never left the moon. There was also a robot pilot named V1N, with unstable programming, who had been deactivated twice, but insisted it could learn emotions. Rosa didn't care. She needed every hand. As the fleet prepared to leave, many people mocked them. Journalists called it a fool's mission. Politicians expected failure, but Rosa didn't listen. She gave orders, checked systems, and looked out the window at the stars. She had nothing to prove anymore, but she wasn't going to let a desperate call go unanswered. The fleet jumped through hyperspace, heading into unknown regions. Every ship shook. The new crew members felt sick. Some cried, but they kept going. They trained during the journey, learning how to work together, how to trust, how to be ready. Rosa walked among them every day, teaching them not from books, but from scars. She told them what real battles felt like. Fear was normal, but quitting wasn't. Meanwhile, on Aurelia Prime, Kelvorn waited. Days passed. The sky grew darker. People lost hope. Some said no one would come. Others started preparing for death. The Threxian fleet was close, now hours away. Fires burned in the distance. Children hid underground. And then, one quiet night, something changed. A strange light appeared in the sky, a ripple in space. Then came 5 ships, small, old, and scarred, but human. The Aurelians rushed to rooftops, confused. Was this help or a trick? Kelvorn went to the landing platform, heart pounding. When the first human ship landed, he stepped forward and saw a woman in a faded uniform step out. She had gray hair, sharp eyes, and a firm voice. She said, "I'm Admiral Roosevelt. We got your message." Kelvorn looked at the small fleet behind her and felt his chest sink. This was not an armada, not powerful weapons or mighty warriors, just a few ships and strangers. "Is this all?" he asked. Rosa didn't flinch. "It's enough." In that moment, something changed. Not in the sky, not in weapons, but in hearts. Against all reason, the Aurelians began to feel something they hadn't felt in weeks. Not fear, not anger, but a strange new thing. Hope. Because sometimes help doesn't come in shining armor. Sometimes it comes in rusted metal, with tired eyes and stubborn hearts. The galaxy didn't know it yet, but something important had just begun. Here is part 2 of the story, Alien Begged for Help. Humans responded with their weakest fleet, but it was more than enough, written in simple and interesting English. Around 2,500 words, with no headings, the moment Roosevelt stepped onto the surface of Aurelia Prime, a strange silence spread through the crowd of Aurelians who had gathered. They were tall, beautiful creatures with golden skin and glowing blue eyes, but now their faces were tired and filled with fear. They had been hoping for a miracle, for a powerful force to save them. What they got instead was a handful of rusty ships and a human woman who looked more like an old teacher than a war hero, Kelvorn. The alien leader who had sent the desperate message into space stood just a few steps away. He tried not to let his disappointment show, but it was clear. These humans didn't look like saviors. They looked like they were here by accident. But there was something in Rose's eyes that made him pause. She didn't look afraid. Like someone who had already faced death. Many times, and didn't care if it came again. Rosa looked around at the damaged buildings. The scared children hiding behind pillars, the broken weapons lying on the ground. She saw a people who had lost everything. Then she looked up at the sky. Somewhere out there, the Threxian fleet was coming. She had maybe 2 days to prepare for war, and she didn't even know the full situation yet. Back at her fleet, orbiting above the planet, her officers were busy trying to make the old systems work. The Un's Aurora creaked with every turn. Its main engine had overheated twice since arriving. One of the smaller escort ships had a crack in its fuel chamber. The communication signals were full of static, and the defense grid was only 60% online. Still, the crew kept working. Omar Reyes, the teenage tactical officer, sat in the dark corner of the control room, studying every bit of data they had. He had never seen a real alien war fleet before, but he had read every book on space strategy. His mind was sharp, always moving, always planning. He knew that if they tried to face the Threxians head-on, they would be destroyed in minutes. But if they fought smart, maybe, just maybe, they could hold out down in the planet's main city. Rosa walked through the remains of what was once a beautiful alien capital. Floating towers were broken in half. Crystal gardens were now just piles of glowing dust. She was shown the map of where the enemy had already attacked. The Threxians had taken over 7 Auralian colonies and destroyed 5 moons. They were ruthless and fast. They used fear as a weapon. Rosa listened carefully to every detail Kelvoran shared. She asked for schematics of the city, of the power systems, of every hill, cave, and shadow where her team could hide. She had a plan forming, but she needed her crew to believe in it first. That night, she called a meeting aboard the Aurora. Her officers gathered, unsure of what to expect. Petrov, the clumsy engineer, still had grease on his face. Dr. Kayla Mendez, the linguist and medical officer, held her translator pad tightly. V1N, the robot pilot, sat quietly, its metal eyes blinking slowly. Rosa looked at them and smiled. "I know what you're all thinking," she began. "We're not the right fleet for this job. We're not strong enough, not fast enough, trained enough, and you're right. We're not the best Earth has, but we're all they've got." No one said a word. "We don't need to destroy the Threxians," she continued. "We just need to hurt them, confuse them, make them think we're stronger than we are, make them wonder if Earth has sent something more powerful hidden behind. Us, we use their fear, their pride, their overconfidence. That's our weapon." She paused, letting the words settle. "We fight dirty, we trick them, we use the city's tunnels, the asteroid belts, the gravity around the planet. We turn every weakness into a trap. And we do it together." Petrov raised his hand, nervous. "And if it fails, then we fail together," Rosa said. But not without making them bleed. The room was quiet again. Then Omar stood up. "I have a plan," he said. Everyone turned toward him. "It's risky. It involves fake signals, decoy ships, and a bunch of tiny drones flying into their engine vents. But if we pull it off, we can take out one of their destroyers." Rosa smiled. "That's what I like to hear." The next 2 days were a blur of activity. Ships were repaired as fast as possible. The Auralians helped where they could. For the first time in weeks, they were working towards something instead of waiting to die. Rosa's crew trained hard. Kayla taught some Auralians how to use human weapons. Petrov built small tracking devices using alien tech and spare parts from old radios. V1N tested a new flight pattern through the city's lower atmosphere, preparing to lure enemy ships into ambush zones. But there were moments of doubt. Late at night, Omar sat alone, staring at the stars. He remembered his brother, who had died in a shuttle accident years ago. It was the reason Omar had joined the fleet. He wanted to make sure no one else died alone in space. But now, he felt fear creeping in. He wasn't ready. What if his plan failed? What if people died because of him? Kayla found him there, holding a cup of warm nutrient tea. "You okay?" she asked. He shook his head. "They think I'm a genius, but I'm just guessing. I've never done this before." Kayla sat. Beside him, none of us have. But guess what? Neither have the Threxians fought humans. They don't know how wild we are. He laughed a little. "You think we're wild?" "Absolutely," she smiled. "Who else answers a call for help with a broken fleet and a robot that talks about feelings?" V1N, who had quietly approached, replied, "I am developing a concept." Of sarcasm? Was that it? They all laughed softly. It didn't solve their problems, but it helped. As the final hours approached, sensors picked up movement in space. The Threxians were coming. Their fleet was bigger than expected, 12 ships, including a heavy destroyer. The planet's defenses wouldn't last long. Raza sent a message to her fleet. "This is it. We show them what Earth is made of. Show them that you don't need to be perfect to be brave. Get to your stations, and remember, the galaxy is watching." The fleet went dark, hiding in the shadows of moons and asteroids. The Auralians powered down their remaining city lights, making it harder to target from space. Omar's drones floated quietly in orbit, ready to strike. Kayla jammed Threxian signals using old satellites in alien ruins that somehow boosted the interference. Petrov finished wiring the final trap-in energy surge device hidden inside an old tower. The first Threxian ship entered orbit, then another. Enemy thought it was an easy win. No big human fleet in sight. Just some old ships, a broken city, and scared people. They didn't know they were walking into a trap at Rosas' command. One small human ship powered up and fired a single missile. Then it jumped away. The Threxians chased it straight into a gravity field that caused them to spin. That's when Omar's drones moved in. Tiny, silent, and fast, they hit the enemy engine vents, overloading one of the destroyers from inside. The explosion lit up the night sky. The Auralians cheered. From the ground, for the first time, they saw the enemy ship fall. Rosa gripped her command chair. Now we fight. The battle had begun. Here is part 3 of the story. Alien begged for help. Humans responded with their weakest fleet, but it was more than enough. Written in simple and interesting English, with emotional depth around 2,500 words and no headings, the explosion from the first Threxian destroyer lit up the sky like a second sun. From the ground, the Auralians watched with wide eyes. Many of them had been hiding in tunnels, too scared to look at the sky. But now something had changed. For the first time, they saw a Threxian ship fall. It wasn't because of some powerful weapon or huge army. It was because of a few human ships working together, using clever tricks and courage. Up in orbit, the small human fleet was moving fast. They couldn't win in a normal battle. Their ships were too old. Their weapons were too weak. Was never Rosa Vale's plan. She knew her fleet couldn't overpower the Threxians, but they could outsmart them, and that's exactly what they were doing. Inside the command center of the UN's Aurora, Rosa stood beside Omar, who was watching the screens with focused eyes. His plan had worked. The drones he had designed, small, fast, and silent, had found their way into the vents of the Threxian destroyer. They exploded from the inside, turning the enemy ship into a burning ball of metal. But this was only the beginning. The rest of the Threxian fleet didn't panic. They were cruel and experienced. They saw the explosion, but they didn't turn back. Instead, they spread out, looking for the human ships. Their sensors scanned every part of space. One of their warships found the signature of the Unsilver Hand. One of the smallest ships in Rosa's fleet. The Silver Hand had only a few crew members. They were young, nervous, and had never seen real combat. But they followed Rosa's orders without hesitation. As soon as the Threxians locked onto them, the Silver Hand dropped decoy mines and turned toward the nearby moon. The enemy ship followed. Not knowing that Rosa had planned this exact moment behind that moon, Petrov had placed energy charges old, unstable, but powerful. The Silver Hand flew close to the surface, then jumped away just before the Threxian ship reached the same spot. Petrov, sweating and shaking, pressed the button. The charges exploded. Rocks flew into space. Flames burst from the surface. And the Phyrexian warship was torn apart in the blast. Another enemy ship down. Back on Aurelia Prime. Kelveron stood in the main hall with other Aurelian leaders, watching the battle unfold on a large screen. Their mouths were open. None of them had believed that humans could do this. They'd been ready to die, ready to lose everything. But now, 2 Phyrexian ships were destroyed, and the rest were struggling to catch the humans. How are they doing? This, one of the Aurelian guards whispered. They fight like they have nothing to lose, Kelvoran answered softly. In truth, Rosa's fleet had everything to lose. Every pilot, every engineer, every technician they were risking there lives on this mission. And now, the enemy was getting angry. The Phyrexians stopped chasing and started attacking from a distance. They launched dozens of long-range missiles, trying to hit the humans from far away. The Yun's Aurora shook as 2 of those missiles exploded nearby. Lights flickered. Alarms screamed. Rosa held onto the railing and shouted orders. Evasive pattern. 6. Get us behind the asteroid field. B1N, the robot pilot, responded in its calm, slightly strange voice. Executing. Please keep all arms and legs inside the burning coffin. The ship dove into the asteroid belt, with debris and rocks all around. Behind them, the missiles kept coming. But this was where the humans had another advantage. Knew how to fight dirty. Inside the asteroid field, Omar activated another part of his plan. They had placed heat flares inside a few large rocks. When the enemy scanned the area, they saw what looked like 5 or 6 more human ships hiding in the field. The Phyrexians were confused. Their leader, aboard a large command cruiser, growled in frustration. They thought the humans had sent a small, weak fleet. But now it looked like reinforcements were hiding nearby. Was it a trap? Were stronger Earth forces waiting just out of sight? Air and confusion spread through their ranks. That was the weapon Rosa had been counting on, but even good plans come with risks as the battle continued. One of Rosa's escort ships, the UN's Valiant, was hit by a plasma beam. The hull cracked. Fire spread. The crew tried to fight the damage, but it was too much. The captain, a quiet woman named Yara, stayed at the controls, holding the ship steady while the rest of the crew escaped in pods. She didn't survive. News hit the fleet hard. Kayla Mendez, who had shared meals and stories with Yara just days earlier, sat alone in the medical bay, tears running down her face. She was not a soldier. She had come on this mission to study languages and help translate alien tech. Now she was in the middle of a war, watching friends die. Rosa visited her, sitting beside her on the cold bench. "You okay?" she asked gently. "No." Kayla whispered. "She was my friend." "I know," Rosa said. "And I won't pretend it's okay, but this is war. We fight not because we love it, but because if we don't, more people like Yara will die. Not just humans, but the Aurelians. Children, families." Kayla nodded slowly. She wiped her tears and stood up. "Then I'm going back to work," and she did. With more fire than before, while the battle raged in space, something strange began to happen on the ground. The Aurelians, who had always stayed away from humans, began to help. Soldiers brought supplies to human landing zones. Engineers worked with Petrov to build better shields. Even children helped carry tools. They didn't see the humans as weak anymore. They saw them as brave. As friends, Kelvoran personally visited the Aurora, standing beside Rosa as they watched the enemy regroup. "You've done more than we ever expected," he said. Rosa looked at the screens. "We're not done yet. But you've lost people," Kelvoran said. "You're just a small fleet. You can still retreat." Rosa turned to him. "We don't run when others are dying." Kelvoran didn't reply. But in his eyes there was something new. Respect. Deep respect. Back in orbit, the Phyrexians changed tactics. They began to fire EMP blasts, hoping to disable the human ships. One blast hit the Aurora directly. The lights died. The engines shut. Off. For a moment, everything was silent. Dead inside the dark ship. Rosa and her crew sat quietly. Then Petrov's voice came over the emergency line. Backup system is fried. I need 5 minutes to reroute power. Rosa looked at V1N, the robots. Eyes blinked, then shut off. Even it was down. They were floating, defenseless. The enemy saw it and moved in for the kill. But before they could strike, something unexpected happened. Omar had predicted this might happen, and so days ago he had placed a backup control unit. Inside a maintenance tunnel, powered by an old nuclear battery, it wasn't strong, but it was enough to send one signal, a burst of fake data. The Threxians received it just as they prepared to fire. The signal told them that 3 large Earth warships were approaching fast. The message was full of fake coordinates and code words. But it looked real. The enemy hesitated, and that gave Petrov just enough time. Power returned. The lights came back on. The engines hummed. V1N rebooted and immediately said, I dreamed I was a toaster. It was terrifying. The Aurora fired a full blast from its cannons. Another Threxian ship was hit and began to fall. Cheers erupted across the human fleet. The enemy, now down 3 ships, and unsure if Earth reinforcements were arriving, began to retreat slightly. Their leader growled in rage, but knew. They had been tricked. They hadn't expected this. Not from humans. Not from a forgotten fleet, and certainly not from a group of so-called WEAs. As the battle cooled down, Rosa sent out a message to the Threxian commander. This is Admiral Roosevelt of Earth. You came to kill a wounded people. We came to stop you. You thought we were weak. You thought wrong. The message spread. Not just to the enemy, but across nearby systems. Other species began to listen. They heard the story of a small human fleet that stood against a giant and didn't run. A fleet that protected strangers. A fleet that fought with courage instead of power. The battle wasn't over, but something had changed. The galaxy was watching, and for the first time, it began to fear not Earth's strength, but its spirit. Here is part 4 of the story Alien Begged for Help. Humans responded with their weakest fleet, but it was more than enough. Explained in simple and interesting English, with emotional depth and strong storytelling. Around 2,500 words written. Without headings, the space around Aurelia Prime was quiet, but it was the kind of silence that comes before something terrible. After hours of clever fighting, Rosa's fleet had managed to destroy 3 enemy ships. They had made the Threxians nervous, uncertain, but Rosa knew the battle was far from over. She also knew that fear made the enemy more dangerous. The Threxians were not used to losing. Their leader, Commander Gorak, sat in his dark, cold command center on the largest ship of the Fleeta, massive warship known across the galaxy as the Doomfang. His face was full of anger, his sharp teeth clenched. His pride was injured. Humans, whom he had considered no more than insects, had destroyed 3 of his ships. It was unacceptable. And now he wanted to crush them completely, not just to win, but to teach a lesson. Meanwhile, on the surface of Aurelia Prime, Roosevelt met with Kelvaron and the other Aurelian leaders. The room was quiet, but the mood was tense. Kelvaron had learned to respect the humans, but he also understood what was coming. We bought time, Rosa said, her voice calm but serious. But we can't win a long war. Kelvaron nodded. We know. The Threxians have sent a message to their main fleet. More ships may come. We have no reinforcements, Rosa admitted. Earth can't send help in time, so what do we do now? Want? Asked one of the Aurelian council members. Rosa looked at everyone in the room. We'd fight one more time. But this time we go all in. We use every trick. Every sacrifice. If we can destroy the Doomfang, the Threxians might back off. That ship is their pride. If we break it, we break their spirit. Back on the Aurora, Omar Reyes worked without rest. He was creating a final plan, a high-risk, high-reward strategy that could change everything. He used every satellite, every drone, every piece of data they had. His plan involved the asteroid field, the planet's gravity, and even the old ruins beneath the surface of the city, but the plan required someone to act as bait, someone who could lure the Doomfang into the trap. "I'll do it," Rosa said without hesitation. Her officers stared at her in shock. "You'll die," Kayla whispered. "Maybe," Rosa said. "But if we don't do this, we all die." Omar said, standing up. "You're the leader." "You can't." "Yes, I can," Rosa interrupted. "You made the plan. You're the future. Just the one with the scars." She turned to V1N, the robot pilot. "You're flying with me?" V1N tilted its head. "Of course. I've always wanted to see what dying with honor feels like." Kayla frowned. "That's not helping." Preparations began. Rosa and V1N would fly the Aurora directly at the Doomfang, acting like they were desperate and trying to surrender. It would lead the enemy into a specific area of space where Omar and Petrov had placed dozens of hidden explosive mines inside asteroids. Once the Doomfang entered that zone, the mines would trigger and destroy the ship from the inside out. It was risky. Too risky, but it was all they had. As they prepared, Rosa recorded a message. It was short and simple. "This is Admiral Rosa. Veil of Earth. If you're hearing this, I may be gone. But know this, we came not for war, but because someone asked for help. And when someone asks, we answer." She left the recording in the ship's log. Then she walked through the corridors one last time. She stopped in the engine room and nodded at Petrov, who saluted with tears in his eyes. She passed the medical bay and saw Kayla checking supplies, pretending not to cry. Omar stood in the control room, staring at the star map, not saying a word. Rosa placed a hand on his shoulder. "You were brilliant," she said softly. He turned and hugged her tightly. "No." She froze at first, then hugged him back. "Come back." He whispered. "I'll try," she replied. Then she walked to the bridge. The final mission had begun. The Aurora left the main fleet, flying straight toward the Threxian formation. On board, Rosa and V1N sat together in the cockpit. Outside, the enemy ships moved into position. "They are charging weapons," V1N reported. "Good," Rosa said. "Let them think we're scared." She opened a channel to the Threxians. "This is Admiral Vale. My ship is damaged. I surrender. Take me to your commander." There was silence for a moment. Then a response came, deep, rough, full of hate. "This is Commander Gorak. I accept. Come forward." As the Aurora approached, it flew exactly as planned, toward the minefield hidden inside a quiet stretch of space. It was silent, cold, and full of floating rocks. Rosa kept her voice steady. "We're almost there." "Any sign they suspect the trap?" "Oh," V1N said. "They believe you are foolish. Do not understand humans." "Good," Rosa whispered. But then something unexpected happened. The Threxians launched a boarding pod. "They're trying to capture us," V1N said. "Not destroy." Rosa's eyes narrowed. "They want to parade us like trophies." "Not if I can help it," she growled. The pod hit the hole. Red lights flashed. Rosa grabbed her weapon. Within seconds, 5 Threxian warriors broke through a hatch and entered the ship. The fight was brutal. Rosa shot one through the head. V1N slammed 2 more against the wall with mechanical arms. But one Threxian stabbed Rosa in the leg. She screamed in pain but kept fighting. Blood poured from her wound, but she didn't stop. She threw a grenade down the hallway and limped back to the bridge. We're close, V1N said. The Doomfang is entering the trap zone. Do it, Rosa whispered. V1N sent the signal. High above, dozens of asteroids lit up as the mines inside them activated. They exploded in perfect sequence, sending shockwaves through space. The Doomfang was caught in the middle. Inside the enemy ship, alarms screamed. Metal tore apart. Fires spread. Gorak roared in rage as his ship broke into pieces. One last explosion tore through the core, and just like that, the Doomfang was gone. The enemy fleet panicked. Without their leader, they began to retreat. On the Aurora, Rosa collapsed in her chair. Smoke filled the room. A bee. V1N's body sparked and trembled. We did it? Rosa whispered. Yes, V1N said softly. You were amazing. Then its eyes went dark. Rosa reached for the emergency beacon. She pressed it with bloody fingers. Mission complete, she said. Enemy defeated. Then she passed out. Hours later, the remaining human ships found. The Aurora drifting. The Auralans sent medical teams. Kayla cried as she found Rosa still breathing, though barely alive. Omar stood quietly beside her bed, holding her hand. Petrov stood in the engine room and wept for V1N, the strange robot, who had saved them all. Back on the planet, Kelvorn stood before a crowd of Auralans and humans. He raised his voice so everyone could hear. These humans came with nothing. No great weapons, no powerful army, only courage. And that courage saved us all. The crowd cheered. Later that night, Rosa opened her eyes in a hospital bed. Kayla was beside her. You made it, Kayla smiled. Barely, Rosa croaked. V1N didn't, Kayla said softly. Rosa closed her eyes. He was a good soldier, a good friend. You're a hero now, Kayla said. The galaxy is watching. I don't care, Rosa whispered. As long as they remember why we came, somewhere far away, on 100 different planets. People began to tell the story of how the weakest human fleet did the impossible. The story of how a few brave souls stood against a monster and won. The story of hope. Of course, here's the part 5 of the story. Alien begged for help. Humans responded with their weakest fleet, but it was more than enough explained in simple, interesting English with no headings, and expanded to reflect a 2,500-word style. Storytelling pace, the smoke from the final battle had cleared. Pieces of the giant Threxian ship, Doomfang, floated silently in space, glowing like broken stars. On the surface of the Auralan planet, people stood in quiet disbelief. For so long, they had only known fear, loss, and surrender. Now, for the first time in many years, there was silence, the kind that came after destruction, but the kind that came before something new. Admiral Rosa Vale stood inside the command center of the UN's Aurora. Looking at the view screen, her ship was damaged, her crew tired, but they had survived. Her hand trembled slightly as she reached for the communicator. Her voice, though calm, carried weight and exhaustion. This is Admiral Rosa Vale. Mission successful. The enemy capital ship is destroyed. Repeat, the Doomfang has been neutralized. Survivors being rescued. Human fleet holding position. Around her, the bridge crew let out slow breaths. Some cried quietly. Some smiled in disbelief. Rosa looked. Around the room at their young faces, they had come into space as rookies. Now, they were warriors, survivors, heroes. On the Auralan homeworld, Kelvorn, the alien leader who had first sent the message begging for help, stood among a crowd of his people. He stared at the sky, where the stars had been hidden behind. Enemy ships for so long? Now, there was nothing but peace. A little girl, her clothes torn and face dirty, tugged at his robe. Was that the humans? She asked. Kelvorn nodded slowly. Yes, child. They came for us. He looked around at the gathering crowd, families reunited, children laughing, old ones hugging each other with tears. These were moments he never thought he would live to see. He remembered the moment he had sent that final desperate signal, thinking it would be ignored or lost. And yet Earth had responded. not with a massive fleet or powerful weapons, but with their weakest force. And still, they had done the impossible in the following days. Rosa and her crew worked with the Auralians to help recover from the war. Human medics treated wounded aliens. Engineers repaired water systems, cleaned ruined buildings, and set up food stations. Dr. Kayla Mendez, who had once just been a linguist with a passion for alien languages, now worked side by side with Auralian leaders, helping them understand human culture, medicine, and communication. She no longer felt small or unsure. She had found her purpose. Omar Reyes, the young tactical genius, was everywhere. He helped plan city defense grids, mapped safe zones for rebuilding, and even taught our Raylan children how to play Earth games. His calm brain and warm smile made him loved by all. The alien children started calling him Brightmind, a title of great respect in their culture. He was shy at first, but every time someone thanked him, he'd smile and say, "We only did what we had to do." Even the robot pilot, whose programming had never been approved, became a symbol, though it had sacrificed itself in the final attack. Its memory lived on. Rosa had a statue made from its remaining parts, placed near the battlefield. The plaque read, Unit Z3, first non-human hero of the human navy. Brave, loyal, alive in spirit. Back on Earth, things were changing. 2. At first, many leaders had dismissed the fleet's mission, expected failure. But when they received Rosa's transmission and the full battle reports, the world stood still. News spread like wildfire. Video footage of the battle leaked, showing how the old ships, rookies, and rejected captain had defeated a force that had crushed entire star systems. People cried watching the bravery. Students in schools chanted Rosa's name. Children built models of the Aurora and played make-believe games where they defeated Threxian invaders. The president of Earth himself appeared on global broadcast and said, "Today humanity has shown the galaxy who we are. We may not have sent our strongest fleet, but we sent our bravest. And they proved something greater than power. They proved heart." Rosa, however, stayed humble. She refused medals, big celebrations, or news interviews. Instead, she asked for one thing: to remain with the Auralians and help rebuild. She said, "I've spent my whole life fighting. Now, I want to build something that lasts." The Auralians made her an honorary citizen. They carved her name into the Stones of Unity, a sacred monument, reserved only for those who brought great change to their people. Standing beside that monument, Kelveron said, "She came not as a savior, but as a sister, and she became our family." Soon, more human. Aid ships arrived. Scientists, farmers, builders all wanting to help. They didn't come to take over. They came to serve. The bond between the two species grew fast. The Auralians taught humans about their deep history, their ancient songs, and their spiritual practices. Humans shared books, music, and even food. The two cultures mixed beautifully. There was a moment one evening, during a festival to celebrate peace, when Rosa stood beside Kelveron, watching humans and Auralians dance together under the stars. He asked her, "Do you think this will last?" Rosa, watching the joy around her, said, "If we protect it together, it will." Omar was later offered a scholarship to Earth's top military academy, but he turned it down. He said he wanted to help design defense systems, not for war but to prevent war. Winning a battle is one thing, he told a group of students, but keeping peace, that's the real challenge. Kayla also chose to stay with the Auralians. She helped build the first interspecies learning center, where human and alien children could study together. She believed that understanding each other was the only way to avoid future conflict. "Fear comes from not knowing," she told a reporter. "But if we raise a generation that learns together, we won't have to fight at all." The Threxians, shaken by their defeat, pulled back from many of the systems they had conquered. Rumors spread that their high command had been furious. How could they have lost to such a weak force? Fear grew in their empire. Not fear of human power, but fear of what it meant. If this was Earth's weakest fleet, what would happen if the strongest ever came? But Earth didn't plan to conquer anyone. Instead, it sent messages to nearby species offering peace talks, trade, and protection. Humanity's name changed in the galaxy. No longer were they seen as young or foolish. Now they were called something else, the Unseen Storm. Quiet, underestimated but devastating when needed. Back on the Aurelians planet. A new monument was built near the ruins of the last battle. It was not tall or grand, just a stone circle. With simple carvings, the center was an inscription in both human and Aurelian language. It read, "They answered our call not with strength, but with spirit." And it was enough. Visitors came from across space to see it. Some cried. Some stood in silence. All of them left changed. Years later, when Rosa was old and walked with a cane, she often visited that monument. Children would run up to her asking for stories. She'd sit on a bench and tell them about a rusty old ship, a smart young boy, a brave robot, and a mission no one thought could succeed. Her eyes would light up, and her voice, though old, would carry strength. And do you know what I learned? She'd ask the children that heroes aren't born with power or fame. They're just people who refuse to quit when it matters most. The children would listen with wide eyes, and then, just before running off, they'd ask, "But how did you know you'd win?" She'd smile softly and whisper, "We didn't. We just hoped. And we fought with everything we had." And so, the story lived on, passed from planet to planet, from human to alien. A story not of victory by power, but of victory by courage, unity, and belief. A story that proved something very important in the vast, dangerous galaxy. Sometimes, when hope is almost gone, and darkness seems too strong, all it takes is someone who cares enough to fight back, no matter how small, weak, or broken they may seem. Because sometimes, that's more than enough.